In a New England Journal of Medicine op-ed, 12 former FDA commissioners are sounding the alarm on FDA vaccine coordinator Dr. Vinay Prasad's imposing of sweeping changes to how the U.S. handles vaccinations. Join us now, former FDA commissioner and CNBC contributor Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He's on the boards of Illumina, Pfizer, and United Health. He's also one of the co-authors of the op-ed. And doctor, just get it out of the way. People are going to say, oh, yeah, gee, a Pfizer guy is promoting vaccines. I don't think it has anything to do with that. And I'm, frankly, I don't know what I am in terms of where this is coming from, in terms of the anti-vax movement based on actual data and science. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So the flu vaccine, I can see if it's 30% effective, why get it? But did we forget polio? Did we forget that this is a very effective way to protect large populations against really terrible things? And that's never going to change, is it? That's almost being called into question. I can't imagine a world that doesn't have vaccines.
That is being called into question. But even with the flu vaccine, you have a safe and effective vaccine that can provide protection. And it's very important for certain people. It depends on the season that we're in. Some seasons it's highly effective. Some seasons it's less effective. It looks to be a little less effective this season based on the circulating strains. But some seasons you have a very highly effective flu vaccine. The issue in the op-ed that we wrote, or the editorial that we wrote in the New England Journal of Medicine, is that they're using their re-adjudication of some tragic cases that occurred with respect to children who were vaccinated for COVID that deserves, vigilant investigation to impose sweeping changes on the whole vaccine approval process and move away from a process that we previously had in place called immunobridging studies, where we basically relied on correlates of immunity. We basically relied on the ability of vaccines to elicit an antibody response as a basis of approval. And this was very important for the ability to update vaccines that change seasonally. So the COVID vaccine, for example, but more importantly, the flu vaccine or the pneumococcal vaccine, where you had drift in the pathogens or the serotypes that were circulating, you wanted to be able to update those vaccines regularly to make accommodation of the changes in the pathogens that were circulating. And so you relied on these immunobridging studies. And in places where you had very established vaccines, the safety and the efficacy was well understood. This was a very important approval paradigm. If, in fact, they go forward with this policy, and I believe they will try to do that, you're not going to be able to update the seasonal flu vaccine. You're not going to be able to update the pneumococcal vaccine. The outcome studies that they're asking for could cost upwards of $1 billion. And so what you're going to do is basically hand a monopoly to the incumbents, like the company I'm on the board of, Pfizer, and crowd out biotechnology companies that might have tried to come into the market with either other vaccines, alternatives that could have been lower cost, or better vaccines. You're really going to thwart innovation and investment in this space. And that's, in fact, what's happening. We've seen biotechnology companies and venture capital syndicates pull away from investing in new vaccines, including a vaccine for the Epstein-Barr virus.
Doctor, here's what the FDA said, and then we'll get back to just figuring out where this all came from. But the FDA, in a statement, said the facts, these criticisms are coming, the fact that they're coming from former FDA officials who opposed raising the bar for vaccine science confirms that we're on the right track. Unfortunately, these former officials lowered standards to the point where pneumonia vaccines didn't lower the rate of pneumonia, and millions of Americans skipped the annual flu vaccine due to uncertain effectiveness. Year to date, the American people deserve evidence-based science, and Dr. Prasad's email lays out a philosophical framework that points us towards that higher standard. We will soon release documents laying out that framework and data confirming how the COVID-19 vaccine resulted in children's deaths that previous leadership failed to properly investigate. So this is a multi-faceted discussion that we're having. I'm trying to figure out where it came from. And the agencies and the administration itself is kind of selecting people that have these notions already, right? Is it all coming down from RFK Jr., the secretary? Because even before any of this COVID, what we're talking about with kids and, what probably should be investigated, but he's been like this for decades, I think. And now the entire agency is in his likeness, image and likeness.
Well, I don't think the entire agency is in his image and Yeah, I don't think the entire agency is in his image and likeness. The people who he's politically appointed to run the agency and the political leadership that they put on top of the career divisions that used to be run by expert scientists but are now being run by political officials are there to carry out his anti-vax agenda.
Well, why did you say he's not? Why did you say they're not in his image and likeness? You just say that they are in his image and likeness. Then, basically,
well, you said the agency. I said the political.
Okay, but they're hiring people that agree with him.
The political leadership. It's a small band of people. You're right. It's interesting in that statement. I haven't seen that statement. This is the first time I'm hearing it. That they refer to Prasad's memo as a philosophical vision. They put it out Friday as a definitive policy. Look, they're systematically trying to dismantle components of the vaccine approval process and make sure vaccines won't be available. I think it's pretty clear right now, and I think they're honest about that, quite frankly. I don't think they're trying to hide that at this point. That's, in fact, what the memo was Friday, and they did it under the pretext of these tragic deaths, which I think is really inappropriate. These deaths in children, if they think there's a causal relationship between the COVID vaccine and those children's deaths, that warrants an exhaustive investigation. But they tried to slip in announcing that their re-adjudication of that data, which had previously been reviewed very exhaustively by the FDA, they tried to slip in this wholesale remaking of the vaccine approval process for vaccines that have nothing to do with the COVID vaccine. Remember, we even approved the HPV vaccine, which is on the cusp of ending cervical cancer, on the basis of these immunobridging studies. This has been an important tool for FDA to get new vaccines on the market. I think what they want is no new vaccines on the market. And look, there's some people, I will give them credit, who have been very honest about that. I think the Secretary Kennedy has been very honest about his intentions. I think Prasad, not so much in implementing these policies, hasn't been transparent about the eventual goal of what he's trying to achieve here. But we're at a point right now where there's been such degradation at the FDA. I really worry the wheels are coming off that agency at a real critical time in the biotechnology industry. Look, the tariffs have been settled. Companies, big pharma companies, now have visibility on their cash flows. They're getting back into doing M&A. That's putting a bid under the market. You're seeing the IPO market for biotechnology stocks reopen. You're seeing really stunning data readouts. And so this is really a renaissance period in biotechnology at a point in which we're trying to compete with China, which is really surging their investments in life sciences. And now you have a deliberate effort to degrade the agency. And there's been a lot of departures from that vaccine review division. There's going to be even more. They're going to be at a point where they can announce these policies, and there's literally going to be no one left to implement them at the agency.
Doctor, was there a concerted effort in the Biden administration to not be totally forthcoming with the risks for the COVID vaccine with children?
Look, I trust the judgment of the people who were there. They were very good people in those positions, and I've spoken with them, and they did an exhaustive review of these individual cases. Remember, the issue of the COVID vaccine in children, and I think we can have a reasonable discussion about how we approach vaccination in children who are at substantially less risk from COVID. But there were points in time in this epidemic when children were getting very sick. I think you'll remember in the summer of 2020 when children were getting that inflammatory condition, MIS-C, during the Delta wave, when there was a lot of concern that this was going to hit children harder than adults. That certainly didn't turn out to be the case. But during the Delta wave, children were getting sick. Now, like a lot of other components of this epidemic or this pandemic, things changed and things evolved. And our policies didn't change quickly enough to accommodate that. Policy making is slow. It's retrospective. But I think you can have a reasonable debate about what we should be doing now with respect to vaccinating kids. But this wholesale remaking of the whole vaccine approval process, that's the issue that we wrote about in this editorial.
Right. Right. It is, there's more to, we really do need definitive evidence and studies to make all our decisions. And I think that's one of your problems is you don't think that's what's the way things are being decided right now.
Well, they're certainly not in the pursuit of definitive evidence. Look, we do have really good studies with respect to vaccines. The vaccines have been approved on the basis of the longest, largest studies that have ever been done. You look at things like the rotavirus vaccine, 60,000 people, HPV, tens of thousands. Even the COVID vaccine, individually, there were 40,000 patient clinical trials. These are large studies that we do. Once we establish a baseline of efficacy for these vaccines, we do allow them to be updated when you have drift in the viruses on the basis of immunogenicity, the ability to elicit antibodies. That's what Vinay Prasad is saying that they're going to end. They want outcome studies for every vaccine, including the seasonal flu vaccine, which means you're just not going to have it. And so Americans need to make a decision. Do they want access to the flu vaccine? Even if you choose not to take it, do you want it to be available or not?